Okay. Hello, everyone out there in the Facebook sphere. My name is Merritt Beria, and I am an organizer for the Mississippi Democratic Party's Voter Protection Team. And here with me this evening, I have our State Program Director, Latoya Thompson. I have Senate Minority Vice Chair, Senator David Blunt, and Senate Minority Leader, Senator Derek Simmons. And I'm going to let each of my panelists go around and introduce themselves in a little greater depth. So if you want to start, Director Thompson.
Hello, my name is Latoya Thompson, Latoya Red Thompson. I grew up in Rankin County, Mississippi. I'm a proud Mississippi native. I went away to school and came back because I love Mississippi, and I came back to go to law school, and I have the privilege right now of being the Voter Protection Director with the state party, the Democratic State Party, and we work closely with Stacey Abrams Fairfight. We also work closely with the Democratic National Committee to advance voting, to give people access to voting, to work against threats that would keep people from voting.
Thank you. Senator Blunt.
Thank you. I'm David Blunt. I represent Senate District 29 in Hinds County. That's Jackson, Byram, and Terry in Hinds County, serving the state Senate. I also serve on the Senate Elections Committee. We'll be talking about legislation tonight. And I am Vice Chairman of the Senate Democratic Caucus.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. And welcome, Senator Simmons.
Hello, Merritt, Latoya, Senator Blunt, and all of the Facebook watchers out there. I'm Senator Derek T. Simmons. I represent Senate District 12 in Mississippi Delta. It covers Bolivar, Washington, and Coahoma counties. I do not serve on the Senate Elections Committee, but I am a proponent of making sure everyone has an opportunity to participate in free and fair elections, and also to create an opportunity where we could eliminate voter suppression. And I look forward to continue our efforts in the Senate Democratic Caucus regarding make sure that everybody get a chance to exercise their fundamental right to vote. And again, I'm Senator Derek Simmons, and I am the Senate Minority Leader.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I first want to start by talking a little bit about the state of things in Mississippi as it relates to coronavirus. I know that over the weekend we saw one of the largest peaks that we've seen thus far. And I just want to talk a little bit about the current state of things and how that relates to the elections in November.
Well, yes, Mayor, we have seen a big peak in cases. We've had some of our highest numbers during the month of May. We had several days with over 400 cases. We currently have over 16,000 cases and over 700 deaths from COVID in Mississippi. And this is really important because voting safely during a health pandemic is not a party thing, right? It affects all of us, all parties, all races. It's about lives, and it's about people being able to exercise a fundamental right in a safe way. And we saw in Wisconsin recently, and I was able to talk to the Wisconsin Voter Protection Director about it, but they've had 71 people, according to the Wisconsin State Department of Health, who voted in person on election day because they couldn't get a mail-in ballot or worked at the polls during Wisconsin's April primary, who now have COVID. 71 people, or who at some point in the couple of weeks after voting had COVID. And there were studies to show that the more people there were at the poll, the more people in that county got COVID. So this is a real concern coming up on November, and the senators might want to refer as well to a recent poll we had in Mississippi that says 70% of Mississippi voters are concerned about disruptions to the November elections because of COVID, and 54% of Mississippi voters want everybody to be able to vote by mail so that they can vote safely.
Yeah, and Mayor, I think that's really important. Unfortunately, what Wisconsin went through should serve as a guide for us in Mississippi. We don't have to repeat what we saw in Wisconsin. We could actually have an election where people can exercise their right to vote and not at the same time be exposed to the transmission of this deadly virus. So I think that those polls are telling anytime we have over 50% of Mississippians that want to actually vote by mail or vote in some kind of way where they can exercise their right to vote, but at the same time take care of their health and their safety, I think that should be our primary focus in the legislature.
And let's be honest here. In Mississippi, we start behind, and we come from a history where many of our citizens have been denied the right to vote, and we've had laws that have made it intentionally difficult for citizens to vote. So before this virus occurred, we were behind, and I've been pushing for years to do some basic common sense things for elections all the time, not just in a year when there's a virus. It needs to be easier to register to vote. It needs to be easier to vote in person. It needs to be easier to vote absentee. So the track we're on right now is we hope to make some changes this year that will be permanent, that will make it easier for voters in Mississippi. And then we need to take steps this year with some answers that are limited to voting in a pandemic year. And I hope we can do both those things. Now, the world we live in, and Senator Simmons knows this, and y'all know this, the legislature is controlled by the Republicans. That's a supermajority. So if we're going to pass legislation in the House and the Senate, pass legislation the governor will sign, we've got to do it in a bipartisan way. So we're working with some of our Republican colleagues now. The Senate Elections Committee and the House Elections Committee are both chaired by Republicans. So we're trying to move forward with things that we can agree on. Maybe it's not everything that I would like to do or that Senator Derek Simmons would like to do, but we're trying to do something positive. Again, some of this stuff needs to be permanent, and some of it needs to be expansive for a pandemic year.
I'm happy to hear you say that, Senator Blunt, and that leads me to my next question, which is, what is the current lay of the land in Mississippi as far as absentee voting goes, and who is eligible to vote absentee, and what are the bars to easy, safe voting currently, and kind of how do we seek to address that?
Well, as far as absentee voting is concerned, there are two ways to vote absentee under state law right now. One is absentee by mail, and one is absentee in person, which is essentially early voting for the people who qualify. So not everybody who can vote early in person can vote by mail. So that's something, personally, I would like to see it. All of this needs to be easier. The law requires a notary requirement on an application, a notary requirement on a ballot, an additional application, an additional notary for a runoff. I mean, this is all just cumbersome. So we need to change the absentee process, as I said, and I feel like we have a chance to make some changes to the absentee process this year. And then as far as the pandemic is concerned, to me, the very simple answer is to say everybody in Mississippi can vote absentee when it's a pandemic, in person or by mail. When there's a pandemic, you need to be able to vote by mail if you choose to do that. We've got a process in place for that. I don't know if we'll be successful in doing all of that, but I do think that we will. I'm hopeful, at least. I can't predict, and as I said, I don't chair the committee, but I'm hopeful that we can make some progress on some things that are specific for a pandemic year for absentee voting, either early in the courthouse or by mail.
Yeah. So, Mayor, just to get into a little bit of the nuts and the bolts of what has to happen for you to vote absentee now. First of all, only certain people can vote absentee. So,
That's right.
Like students, teachers, people who temporarily reside outside of their county for school. Some people who temporarily reside outside of their county for work, like members of Congress and those folks and their spouses who live with them. People who are outside of their county for any reason on election day can vote early in person. People with temporary or permanent physical disabilities can vote early, can vote absentee. People 65 years and older can vote absentee, and people who have to work during polling hours can vote absentee. But all those people, as Senator Blunt said, can vote in person, but not all of them can vote by mail. There's a smaller group that can vote by mail. So not only can we not all vote absentee, not even all the people who are defined as absentee can vote by mail. So there are a lot of
And then,
restrictions.
and also, Latoya, in Mississippi, you have to literally request the
You do.
actual. And so in some states, you don't even have to request. I mean, you actually would get a ballot without even having to request. But in Mississippi, you have to literally request. So that's
Unless
another
you
part
are
of the
on the
process.
group of permanently disabled voters, there
Well,
is
That's
a
right.
That's
group
right.
of people in Mississippi who automatically receive their absentee ballot.
Yeah.
That's right, Mayor. But otherwise, as Senator Simmons was saying, you have to apply for, you have to request an application for a ballot. You can't just call and say, send me a ballot. You have to, in oral or written request, ask for an application for a ballot. You have to get an original application. It has to have a circuit clerk seal on it and initials and all these sorts of things. As Senator Blunt says, it has to be signed by an attesting witness, which has to be a notary or a postmaster, or a particular list of people have to witness it. Unless you're disabled, then anybody over 18. But there are all these steps, many steps, and only a few people can actually vote absentee. So that's something that we really want to change, and something that I'm really hopeful about is that, you know, the senators have now in their hands some bills that have passed the House. House Bill 1521 and House Bill 297, if anybody wants to look those up. But 1521 changes the receipt date of absentee ballots, because absentee ballots under current law have to be received by 5 p.m. the day before the election. And so many people have wanted to change that. It was recently changed in Wisconsin. The United States Supreme Court upheld the change that the deadline for mail-in ballots was changed from the day before the election to being postmarked on election day and then being received after the election. So House Bill 1521 offers a change for Mississippi voters to enjoy those extra few days, which, according to what we understand, should be really helpful for college voters, which are in that group of people who temporarily reside outside of their county because they're in school. If the House bill passes the Senate, then starting this November, and I guess really in the election after July 1st when it becomes effective, then Mississippi voters who can vote by mail will be able to postmark their ballot on election day for the first time. And as long as it's received 5 days afterwards, it'll be counted. So that would be a huge win. And then the other bill, 297, has lots of parts. Senator Blunt might or might not want to address those. But in addition to the postmark deadline, all those categories of people that are defined by the statute as absent would be able to vote by mail if that passes. It wouldn't be a few people can vote absentee in person and then even fewer people can vote by mail. All the people defined as absent electors would be able to vote by mail. So that would be a big change too. That will allow a lot of people to vote safely in their home, because as we've talked about in voter protection, the American Medical Association is saying that the coronavirus is going to peak again in terms of transmission in November, in number of cases in December. So we don't want to be part of that peak transmission by sending our people to have to vote at the polls and have to risk their safety. So Senator Blunt and Senator Simmons, if you all want to talk about the bills that I mentioned or anything with respect to the legislative timeline and what you all hope to achieve in terms of legislation, since the ball is in your court.
Well, I'm a punt it to Senator Blunt, but I'm just gonna say that both bills have been referred to committees on the Senate side.
Mm-hmm.
House Bill 1521 has been singly referred to elections, and House Bill 297 has been doubly referred to elections and accountability and transparency committee. So, and the deadline, because we suspended the session in March, and of course we came back twice, and now we are here and we changed the deadlines. The deadlines for House bills to pass out of Senate committees will be next Tuesday. And so if those bills do not move out of those committees by next Tuesday, then those bills in those in that form or in those forms will be dead. Of course, we always can try to put language or take the language out of those bills and include them in other bills, but it's always best to move the actual vehicle that's moving. So Senator Blunt probably would want to get into more details about 1521 and 297, but I will say, LaToya, you did a great job at explaining them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did too. The bill that I expect will be the vehicle is House Bill 1521. Where we are, as Senator Simmons says, is that bill needs to get out of the Senate Elections Committee by a week from today, next Tuesday. There is a public hearing tomorrow, a joint hearing of the House and Senate Elections Committees at the Capitol. We're going to hear from the Secretary of State, election commissioners, and circuit clerks. We're not going to vote on anything. We're just going to hear from them. They're the people who actually have to implement whatever it is that we do. Now, I don't know if the ball is in our court, but Senator Simmons and I are at least on the court. It may not be our court, but we're on the court. And here's what I would say. First, if you think if you're not going to be at home this November, really look into this absentee process and don't wait till the last minute. And it is much too difficult. I have two children who are in college and have tried to do this out of state. It is way too difficult. So the best thing you can do, if you know right now that you're going to be away from home on the first Tuesday in November, is vote absentee in person. One thing that I know we want to do is when you vote absentee in person, and that happens in the courthouse, we want to change it so that you vote on the machine. The same experience that you would have as if you were there on election day. All of these applications, these forms, the more boxes you got to check, the more things you got to sign, the more likely it is human error, contest, all that stuff. We want you voting on the machine where you leave knowing your vote is going to count. So
yes,
I would tell you right now, if you know you're going to be away from home on election day, please don't wait till the last week. And if you're home, of course, no one knows where anybody's going to be this fall, but in person is always safer. But a lot of people can't do that, and that's why we have the process by mail. So we're gonna try to get something that it makes some changes for a pandemic. As I said, I would love to see everybody have the opportunity to vote absentee, every Mississippian, either in person or by mail this November. And then, as I said, the process itself, the idea of having to send multiple applications in an election year. How many people do you know have had a document notarized by a notary public or even know what a notary public is in 2020? This just needs to change. So this is the election in the 4-year cycle that has the biggest turnout. It's a presidential election year. We also have a very competitive U.S. Senate race on the ballot, and everyone needs an opportunity to exercise their right to vote.
And I would like to ask all of you, just kind of, can we elaborate a little bit on this hesitation that we're facing when we talk about vote by mail? I know that is the new arsenal attack that is being launched by Republican leadership, that it's rife with voter fraud, and it disproportionately favors Democrats. And I just want to speak to that narrative a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's just another one of the talking points by the Republican majority, whether it's national or whether it's actually bleeding into our state politics as an effort not to do anything regarding actually expanding or creating a situation where people can exercise their right to vote. I mean, even in 2011, when we had the ballot initiative regarding voter ID, I mean, the people that want to commit fraud, they're not going to the ballot boxes to vote. Those people are criminals already. And so, I mean, just the whole idea of saying people want to engage in fraud as it relates to voting, I mean, the data and the statistics, they just don't pan out and they don't support that. So I don't think it gives any one particular party a leg up. I think both parties, and really it should not even be a party thing. I think just the constitutional fundamental right to vote should be free, it should be fair, and it should be less voter suppression tactics. So I mean that's not Senator Blunt in his words.
Right.
Yeah, there are about 5 or 6. Ms. Latoya may know this, but there are about 5 or 6 states in this country that do the entire election by mail. The
That's
entire
exactly
election.
right.
There are southern states, Georgia, for example, sent an absentee ballot application automatically to every registered voter.
And at least two of
obviously,
those all vote by mail states are Republican dominated.
yeah. So,
But
it's just look, and there may be things that we could not get done in a normal year, but I promise you, think about there are going to be a lot of people this fall who want to vote for Joe Biden, like I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, but there are a lot of people this fall who want to vote for Donald Trump, who don't want to go stand in a long line, who don't want to be in this tight little room in a church basement or a crowded library, who are going to want to vote this way. I mean, that's just true. And we need to recognize that this year. And then, secondly, that they're going to find out they can't vote by mail. I mean, if the law remains the same, and I hope it doesn't, but if it remains the same, they're going to find out they can't vote by mail, or they're going to use the vote by mail process, and they are going to be extremely frustrated because they're not going to want to leave their house. They're going to have to get a document notarized. A week later, they got to get something else notarized, and they're going to think this is nuts.
Yep.
So we've got to make changes right now to get ready for November.
Right. And to speak to the voter fraud piece, because and I'm going to share some information about that, but I'm also curious to hear from the senators when I finish sharing that information. If you actually hear voter fraud from your colleagues, I know Senator Blunt has been working on election law changes for a long time, and I just wonder, do your colleagues actually say to you, because I know the Secretary of State has, he recently put out an op-ed and he talked about the greatest vulnerability of our system would be for us to have universal vote by mail. But as you mentioned, Senator Blunt, 5 states do vote entirely by mail: Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and Utah. And so in Oregon, particularly, we had a call, our voter protection team did, with Stacey Abrams and the governor of Oregon not too long ago. And she talked about what a successful system it's been. They've sent out more than 100 million mail-in ballots since 2000 and only documented about a dozen cases of proven voter fraud. And so the Brennan Center, which is a nonpartisan center that studies things like that, has said voter fraud is essentially non-existent. And even a study by the Trump administration came to the same conclusion, that it is extremely rare. And our esteemed president himself votes by mail. He voted by mail in the primary this year. He was in Florida when early voting was happening, and he could have gone in and voted early, but he flew back to DC and decided to vote by mail because it's a safe option and it's a good option. And if it's safe for people 65 and older, why is it not safe for the rest of us? So voter fraud is a myth. I've also read that even the one party having a leg up, because we've read that and heard statements about that, is also a myth. There's no statistical correlation between allowing people to vote by mail and early voting in one party or another party. And different people are always going to have, their own statistics and their own studies. But there's so many studies saying that it's not really the problem that it's portrayed to be, and that this is just a fear tactic. So I just wonder, like, in real life, as you're trying to get these things passed, do you all actually hear this, from colleagues? Is this a real reason that people offer up and say, I don't want to vote for vote by mail, I don't want to vote for no excuse early voting?
Well, I think we do hear that. A lot of the people we serve with, follow the president closely on Twitter and listen closely to what he has to say. He made a lot of allegations that were completely unfounded and without evidence, even by his own task force that he appointed following the 2016 election. Look, none of us are for voter fraud. I mean, we stand for office ourselves. I mean, we're candidates. None of us are for voter fraud. If the question we have to ask ourselves is, what are the documented cases, and what's the fear that may be out there for fraudulent ballots, versus how many citizens out there are not going to get to cast a ballot? How many citizens out there who are following the law, who want to cast a ballot? How many people will be denied that opportunity because of the laws that we have in place? And which number is greater? Which number is greater? The documented cases, or even whatever fears you may have, versus people that we know who are citizens, who have driver's license, who are registered voters, who are not going to be able to cast a ballot. And so it's very clear to me that the number of people who could be disenfranchised, but for whatever reason, people who are disenfranchised, if that number is greater, then that we've got a problem that we need to fix.
Mm-hmm. That is a great point. That is a great point. And as voter protection, our team, one of the things we really try to do is to do voter education and outreach, to talk about statistics, to talk about studies, to alleviate people who hear, propaganda or other things. And also, anybody who says, do what I say and not what I do, I mean, you have to look at what people do. But we really try to bring to people's attention the realities with respect to the hesitations that are offered to expanding early voting, including voting by mail.
I know we're about to run out of time, but I want to return. Yeah. Think about where we are. Think about how hard it has been for 100 and almost 170 years now to make sure that all citizens in this state can vote, and how rare it has been for this legislature to pass a bill that actually helps people. And most of the progress that we've made, the progress that had been made either on the federal level through passing the right to vote for women, or through the federal courts, the Voting Rights Act, the United States Congress, we need to do something in Mississippi through this legislature that actually helps our people. And this is the perfect year to do it.
Agreed.
This is a perfect year to do it. And that's a great segue to something I want to mention. And then Mayor, you can go ahead. But House Bill 1521, which changes the postmark date and allows us several more days to get our votes in, which could allow who knows how many tens of thousands, potentially more votes, or how many thousands of additional votes. That bill passed the House with 118 yeas and 1 nay. That is amazing. And House Bill 297, who did something similar and some other things, passed with 96 yeas and 24 nays. So there is some real momentum going. So with that momentum, Mary, you can take us on to the next thing. But we want to talk about how we can use that momentum.
Right. Just to your point that this year is ripe with opportunity to actually accomplish something meaningful in Mississippi as far as election reform goes. I wanted to pose the question, how can we, as Mississippi Democratic Party's voter protection team, how can we help? We are in the midst of organizing phone and text bankers for outreach and advocacy to elected officials, but where do we target these efforts? Where do we make the most impact?
And I'll say, Mary, that we have had a change on really any good policy issue without community action. And so what you all are doing, continue to do those things. I mean, whether it was defeating, changing the whole formula regarding our education formula, or whether it was the teacher pay raise, which started off really not meaningful for our teachers who are on the front lines educating all of our children last year, and how we were able, as Democrats and Senator Blunt, have lead the effort in getting people engaged to call our colleagues in the Capitol. And so it's really all of the work outside of the halls and the walls of the Capitol that we really need, because Senator Blunt and I, we can talk to our colleagues all day long, and until they get that pressure from the outside, we don't see the type of change or the type of movement that we need. So there was a great vote in the House, and I think that this is the year to do it, like Senator Blunt said. But we certainly need your help. We need that community action to get involved and to encourage us in the Senate to do the right thing.
We can do that. Who do we contact and when?
Yeah,
You need to think about the people you vote for. Know who your state senator is. Know who your state representative is. Know who you obviously vote for the governor. You vote for the lieutenant governor. Your state representative votes for the speaker. But elected officials respond to the people who vote for them. If both of your legislators are Democrats, you can encourage them. We feel good about our support there. But if your legislators, maybe one of them is a Republican and one's a Democrat, reach out to that Republican who you vote for and ask him or her in a nice way that this is important to you, and let them know.
Great. And so when we are reaching out to elected officials, the most effective is probably going to be your local state senator and representative. And we, as voters, when we reach out, we want to say, Senate bill or House bill, 1621 is incredibly important to me. It's incredibly important that we extend the deadline to receive absentee ballots. Like, what is the language that is most effective, in your opinion, as far as reaching out to your elected officials?
The two things that I would say this year is make the absentee voting process easier and let everybody vote by absentee this year because it's a pandemic. Make it easier. You don't need to know all the details about all this stuff, and let everybody vote absentee this year. That'd be if we can do that, we would have made a big step forward.
And certainly say we would like to take into consideration our health and our safety, but at the same time exercise our right to vote. That's really important.
Awesome.
And let me give you two email addresses.
Please.
Representatives at house.ms.gov. If you actually send an email to that, all 122 members of the House will get that. And then senators at senate.ms.gov, all 52 members of the Senate will get that email. And we get a lot of these emails all the time. And a lot of our colleagues may not actually read their Senate email, but trust me, Senator Blunt and I, we really read our Senate emails.
Will you say those one more time?
Yes, ma'am, Latoya. Representatives at house.ms.gov and senators at senate.ms.gov.
That's awesome.
A personal phone call is always good.
Yes.
So if you live in Rankin County, for example, and you say you identify who your state rep and your state senator is, and you say, "Hello, I live in Brandon. I'm calling because of this." All of us up here, regardless of party, we are sensitive to the people we represent, and that person's going to get that message.
Good. Well, also, while we're in the business of listing URLs and email addresses, I want to let everyone know that our website is www.msdpvoterprotection.com, and we have a page on our website that lists our different volunteer opportunities, and one of those includes phone and text bankers. So if you want to get organized and reach out to your elected officials today, that's a great way to do so.
Does your cat text?
Uh-oh. I live in a zoo, guys. I don't.
The cat wants to advocate for voting.
Oh, she's a big voter. 10 out of 10 Democratic primary voter, this cat. But I just want to give everyone an opportunity to kind of wrap up and say some last words. And I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight, on our Facebook live stream. And I also want to thank you, Senator Simmons, you, Senator Blunt, and you, Director Thompson, for joining us for this panel tonight. I think it's really important that we continue to have these conversations and talk about ways that we can make active election reform here in Mississippi. So thank you all.
Thank
Thank you for
Mayor.
having us.
Thank you for having
I
us.
want to thank
Before-
Senators Blunt. Yeah, I want to thank Senators Blunt and Senator Simmons as well. It's been a pleasure. Your advice has been so helpful, and it's going to directly guide our work over the next week. And it's good to know that we have a week. So we will be on this tomorrow, or tonight rather, trying to get calls made and everybody notified of what's going on in the timeline. To everybody listening, I would just like to say, if you heard us talk about the overwhelming support for the change that we have been able to get in the House, there's so much momentum. As Senator Blunt said, as Senator Simmons said, we have a real chance to achieve some change this year, to expand access to voting, to make sure that our families, coworkers, neighbors, and ourselves can vote safely. And it's really going to depend on me and you and all of us stepping in to support Senators Blunt and Senator Simmons by contacting our elected officials. And if we have any opportunity, we will be in contact with you about doing that. And in the meantime, as Mayor said, please go to our website and sign up. We would love to partner with you to make this happen.
Thank you for having us. I'll say to the viewers out there, if you need to reach me, my email address is senatordavidblunt@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and most days I'm on Instagram, but today my Instagram page is Blunt. But you can find me there too.
Yeah. And you can reach me at the Capitol at 601-359-2224. My email address is dsimmons@senate.ms.gov. And my district office, the phone number is 662-334-1666. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Great. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate it. And you guys have a great evening.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.